Hey everybody, I'm Shay Parker, and welcome to another episode of What is on Your Mind, if that is indeed what I end up calling it, because as of right now I haven't decided yet. Anyway, if you haven't watched this show before, that makes sense. I've only done one episode, so if you want to, you can go click the link in the top right and see the first episode with Mike Murphy of the Brothers Murph. But to give you an idea, this is a show where I want to reach out to other members of the board game media community and talk about the things that they don't usually get a chance to talk about, because while we love board games, we have other interests. And I think that people really want to talk about these things, but we don't always have the outlet to do so. So today I have with me Paula Deming. Hello, Paula.
Hi. Hi, everyone.
How are you doing?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for talking to me today. You at home might know Paula from her board gaming sketch comedy show, Things Get Dicey. She's also a contributor on Watch It Played. Mm-hmm. She is a host of several podcasts, including This Game is Broken, a board gaming panel show where a bunch of idiots are given a bunch of idiotic things to do.
That's
and
exactly
Death by
it.
Monsters, a podcast about monsters, mysteries, and the unknown. Can you tell her? Listen.
You know all of the taglines.
Yes, she streams her own Twitch channel, video games, and she does board games for Gen Con. I'm sure you have other projects, but we have to get to the interview. You're the hardest working woman in board games. We get it.
It's too much. I'm honestly embarrassed whenever people list all the things that I do. I'm like, it's too much. It's too many things.
You have too many projects, and here's the thing, I don't want to talk about any of them.
Good.
Yeah, no, I want to know what you want to talk about. What is it that you have going on? What do you like to do that maybe you don't get to talk about because we fill our lives with our work?
Yeah, well, it's tricky because we were talking before about how we've kind of taken our hobby and monetized it. We've turned our hobby into our hustle, which I think is something that our generation struggles with. But what am I doing when I'm not doing that? That's the question.
Yeah. What do you have anything that you do to unwind or?
I do. Sorry, I'm putting down my tea, just bending out of frame. I'm going to bend out of frame in the other direction now to show you what I'm going to talk about today. What do I do to unwind? Well, how about this? I knit. I knit. I love knitting. Knitting is great. I'm in the middle of making a hat right now.
That's awesome.
So this
I should tell you, I know nothing about knitting. I know that it involves yarn and needles. That's about it.
And it is different from crocheting, which I recently learned how to do for the first time last year. I had a pattern I wanted to make, but it was only in crochet. And I was like, I can learn how to crochet. And it's a different skill. You have to kind of work your brain in a different way, but I did.
That's good to know. I honestly did not know that.
Yeah, because crochets, I wish I had a crochet hook on me. Crochets are hooks, and knitting is two needles. And so it's the same concept where you're making loops of yarn or thread and looping them through each other to make patterns to create a thing. But just the way you're going about actually looping the loops is really different between crochet and knitting. But I can't talk about crochet because I crocheted a dice bag, and that's too close to what I do for work, which is games. Yeah,
that's all right.
I knit.
So you knit. What is it that got you into that? When did you start doing that?
I started doing it my sophomore year of college. So when I was like 20, I guess, I had one of my favorite professors in college, who was our costume design professor, was a big knitter. And she was always knitting. Like in faculty meetings, she would just sit and knit. You know, anytime that her hands could be busy doing knitting, that's what she was doing. And so it was a thing that I think some of the other students started to take an interest in. And so she started showing us how to do it, especially because if you're in a play where maybe you have a small part, so you have to spend a lot of time backstage, you're like, well,
you need something to do.
Yeah, or I think the show where she taught me how to knit was one where I was stage managing. So there were times when I really wasn't doing anything because professionally, a lot of stage managers will call cues, the technical cues for a show, lighting and sound. They'll call the cues, and the people who are operating the soundboard and the lighting board know when to hit all the buttons and make the things happen. But this was a college show in a little black box theater that didn't really need that.
Sure.
So during the actual performances, I was doing nothing backstage, but I still had to be there. And so this is when the opportunity to teach me to knit came up. So that's how I started learning. And I made like my first scarf. It was actually, I think, another student who initially showed me like, oh, here, work on this scarf. Then I was very proud, and I went to my professor, whose name was Martha. And I was like, look what I made. And she was like, this is great. You need to make a hat. Immediately make a hat, because if you don't do that, you will never make anything but scarves. You immediately need to go to something very different so that you'll know that you can do it. Otherwise, you'll get stuck, and all you'll ever do is a scarf. Because a scarf is a pretty easy thing to knit. It's like, a small number of stitches, and you just knit.
I say sure as if I know, but I guess it makes sense. Easy. It's a long rectangle. But that I find that fascinating because it's sort of emblematic of like, yeah, you've learned a skill, you can keep doing that one skill, and yeah, you can perfect that, sure. But if you want to do something more broad with it, you need to immediately challenge yourself.
Yeah, she was like, don't get stuck in this thing. Know that you can. That's such a good, I hadn't thought about it that way, but it really is applicable in so many other things. Like, okay, you've done this. Yeah, immediately jump into a more interesting version of that thing and test yourself and know that, gain confidence in the fact that you can do one step above the basic skill you've just learned. Yeah, and that's, again, and that's what I'm knitting right now, a hat.
You're knitting a hat. So
it's
you started
much better
the scarf,
than my
and now
first
you're knitting
one.
This hat.
This is the hat.
Yeah.
This is the one I started, how many years ago? Oh gosh. 16 years ago, and I've just never finished it. Actually, my first hat. So these are circular needles, which means they're
those are straight needles. You're saying those are circular, but I'm seeing
okay,
them.
They're
they are
straight. But do you see how they have this wire that connects them?
Yeah.
So that you can make them into a circle, as opposed to a straight set of knitting needles that aren't connected at all. You have one needle, and I wish I had them with me, because then I could show you better what I'm talking about. But with this, so I can knit, and it's immediately like, it's a knit in a circle.
It sounds like this is something that you have done as like you need something to do with your hands.
Yes.
And it just happens to also make something.
Mm-hmm.
Do you continue to use it in this way, or do you sit down specifically to knit sometimes?
It depends on what I'm knitting. With something like this hat, the pattern's pretty simple, it's pretty repetitive, so I can put on a TV show. I can put on like Unsolved Mysteries or whatever I'm binging on Netflix, and just do it without really thinking about it while I'm watching something. And I can spend hours doing that. Next thing you know, I have like a whole Saturday. I was like, oh, I watched this whole season of Great British Bake Off, and I knit a hat.
That sounds like the most British way to watch Bake Off.
I guess it is.
If I have to think of something.
Well, I have my tea and knit while I'm watching.
There was no doubt in my mind that you had tea.
I did.
It was already part of my mental image.
Definitely had it. But then there are some patterns that are more complicated. So I've made like little sweaters. I normally do that for like my niece or nephew or baby, because knitting baby things is easier because they're smaller. So they're faster to make.
It makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
What's the biggest thing you've ever knit?
A blanket. I've knit a couple of really large blankets.
Okay. How long did that take?
A long time. I made my niece this really awesome, maybe I'll send you a picture of it and you can like cut it in right here. This really awesome mermaid tail blanket. That's basically like a little throw blanket, but it comes together at the end with a little like fin. So when you have it as like on your lap, you look like you have a mermaid tail on.
That sounds awesome. I cannot wait to put this in the video right here. Look at it and go, oh.
And that took me a long time. It is intensive in terms of time. Took me hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and hours.
I bet, yeah.
And so something like that was a little more complicated pattern. I do have to actually pay active attention to when I'm making it, as opposed to having like something on in the background. So it just kind of depends on the pattern. Yeah.
All right. I want to wrap things up a bit, but I wonder if there's anything maybe that anything else that maybe that you think people don't know about knitting that is just an especially interesting thing about it, or you wish that people would try if they were
I think
to try it for themselves.
It's the kind of thing Right? If you're interested in doing it, try it. It's easy to pick up. It really is. To me, the hardest thing about knitting is learning how to read the patterns, because there's a lot of abbreviations for things. And so I've been knitting for like 16 years, and I still sometimes will get a pattern and then have to look up what something means. But luckily Google and YouTube are perfect for that now. Like, I can learn just about anything about knitting from YouTube now. But if you're interested, like, try it. It's not hard. Like, I've taught my niece and nephew, who are like 11 and 8, how to knit. So you can do it. And it's really fun and satisfying. And really, just if you want, just make scarves. They're really nice. They're lovely. There's something so satisfying about having made an item yourself, especially when people compliment it. And then you're like, I made this. And they're like, what? I'm like, yeah, I know. But the downside is, be prepared for it. I don't buy myself any knit items anymore, because I look at it and I'm like, I could just make this. But that doesn't mean I'm going to make it. So then I just don't have things. It's like how I have an orange tree in my backyard, so I don't ever buy citrus from the store. But it's like, that orange tree isn't always producing oranges.
I like this idea. It's like, I've got an orange tree in my backyard. I don't need to buy limes. If I want a margarita, I'll just make it work.
Use the orange.
Yeah. Right, well,
I know, it makes
thank you
sense.
so much, Paul. Thank you so much for talking to me today. I really appreciate it, and this was a lot of fun to talk about. Is there anything maybe that I didn't mention in the beginning that you want to make sure people know about or to tune in for? Now is your chance. What do you got going on?
I guess there's one other thing I do that's not board game related, that if you're interested, you could check it out. I have a YouTube channel called The Gallifrey Gals, and on that YouTube channel, my friend Katrina and I watch and react to different nerdy TV shows. So my friend Katrina is a huge fan of Doctor Who, and I am now watching Doctor Who with her for the first time, and we're reacting to it. We're also watching Star Trek The Next Generation, because I'm a huge fan of that, and she's never seen it. And I'm showing her Avatar: The Last Airbender, and she's showing me Rick and Morty. So if you are into nerd stuff or reaction videos, and that sounds like something you'd be interested in, you could check that out.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you again, and everybody else, thank you so much for watching.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone, for listening to me talk about knitting. Super exciting.
Hey, so I've been editing this interview with Paula, and I realized that we talked for a while. It's not a surprise, we had a fun conversation, but I do like to edit things, keep things kind of short. However, if you want to see the full extended interview, you can do so on the Patreon, patreon.com/RTFM. Looks like this.